Hi, my name is Sanniah Jabeen and I am a PhD student in the Department of Art History at the University of Toronto. My research focuses on South Asian textiles, and in this video we will be focusing on some kinds of painted and printed textiles from South Asia. So let us begin. Textiles throughout history have been fascinating objects to study because many assume not one but multiple lives. Historically, textiles have been valued for not just being functional and necessary commodities for clothing and domestic purposes, but also as objects of beauty, desire, ritual objects, and markers of social and cultural status. In art history, though one might assume that we lean only towards studying textiles as aesthetic objects, it is important that we understand all their meanings in all their different lives. We understand that when viewed from afar, textiles can act as signifiers of rank for the owner or the wearer, especially through forms of dress. However, a deeper look at many textiles can reveal designs with embodied meaning and symbols that, though are embedded by the maker, can take on multiple meanings as they exchange hands. We can find many such examples of textiles within South Asia. The Indian subcontinent for centuries has been a center for textile development and trade. Even today, most textiles are manufactured in this area. Next time that you're trying to decide what to wear, pause and check the labels of the clothes that you own. Chances are that quite a few of them have been produced either in India, Pakistan, Nepal, or Bangladesh. Historically, Indian textiles have been renowned for their quality of fiber and weave, intricate design, and fastness of color, especially cotton textiles. South Asian printed or patterned cottons have been especially popular throughout history, going back all the way to the Alexandrian world of the Roman Empire, where much common cloth, all kinds of muslins and cottons were produced in the region of the Deccan and in Gujarat. Cotton trade continues today in great numbers, with much of cotton textiles from the finest muslin to the thickest denim being produced in South Asia. Apart from being very comfortable and breathable, printed and painted cotton textiles can tell us many stories. Such types of textiles can include one or a combination of the methods of block printing, where wooden blocks are stamped with color and then pressed firmly onto cotton sheets. Painting, when a textile artist uses a pen or a column soaked in color to carefully paint their preferred design. And dyeing, where the fabric is immersed in color and sometimes dyed or resists dye to produce different designs. Designs on such textiles can be either figurative, with many narratives in them, such as this example that we have of a textile depicting the Indian epic from the Ramayana, made in 1880, which is painted and resist dyed, or non-figurative, such as this ajrak piece that has been designed very recently and block printed and resist dyed. Textile without figure narratives can also tell us many stories. For example, the famous chintz, a painted and printed cotton produced in India that was vastly popular worldwide in the 17th and 18th centuries, has patterns that were developed exclusively for the regions where it was exported. Patterns sent to Europe differed greatly from the patterns and color palettes of the fabric exported to Southeast Asia. For example, over here we have an image that depicts the activities of the wealthy Dutch East India Company employees living in the East, which was developed especially for the Dutch market. And over here we have an example of a textile that was developed for the Indonesian market in the 18th century. We can very clearly see the difference in the aesthetic and the design, proving that patterns can tell us stories of how design was modified for certain audiences. To cover all sorts of textiles produced in South Asia in 10 minutes, it's a difficult task. So for today, we're going to focus on a very popular form of printed cotton known as the ajrak or ajrak, which is also the central focus of my PhD research. The ajrak is a rectangular cotton textile made in both India and Pakistan and is usually printed with geometric patterns in black, red, blue, and white. Though there are many narratives regarding the origin of the cloth and its uses, some taking us back to trade with Mamluk Egypt, and different versions of the ajrak ranging from a laborious 50-step process to the most recent polyester form that is printed digitally directly onto fabric. In recent years, perception of the ajrak within scholarship has been generally reduced to a once dying folk art form. But as art historians, we wonder whether art forms really ever die or do they just transform? To try to answer these questions, let's now take a brief look at its history and its production in one of the most significant ajrak centers in Sindh, Pakistan, to understand its many lives. The origins and stories of the ajrak range from its initial technique and pattern originating from the ancient Indus Valley civilization at Mohenjo-daro some 7,000 years ago, to other arguments that the ajrak coming from the Arabic word azrak meaning blue was introduced by the Arabs upon their conquest of Sindh. Its uses also vary widely, from bed coverings to gift offerings to an ethnic dress, with the tribes in Kutch, India, wearing the ajrak to distinguish themselves as a certain kind of Muslim group, to the government of Sindh, Pakistan, recently making the ajrak shawl as part of the girls' uniform in public schools. To handmake an ajrak is an extensive and laborious process. First and foremost, the ajrak artisan needs a natural environment where water, sun, animals, trees, and mud are all parts of its making. It goes through a multi-phase process with repeated soakings, drying, and block printing. Everything used in the production of a handmade ajrak, as artisans claim, is indigenous. The wooden blocks are created from the indigenous caker trees, which grow naturally in Sindh. Water is taken from the nearby Indus River. Camel dung is used extensively to bring out color, and only natural sunlight is used to dry, and natural dyes from indigo and madder plants are used. The raw cotton fabric in full length is pulled exhaustively through the river multiple times, scarred, beaten, steamed, mordanted, printed with resist mud paste from the banks of the river, covered with powdered camel dung and ground rice husk, and dyed deep. According to a master crafter or some master craftsmen, it is only possible to get the complex ajrak formula right within Sindh. Without the water of the Indus with its particular pH levels and the printing blocks from the nearby trees, they claim that we cannot get the right results for the ajrak. The names of the printed motifs are also evocative of nature or domestic life within Sindh, such as kakkar, cloud, moor, peacock, badam, paisley, almond, etc. While describing the painstaking process of creating an ajrak, some scholars also stress upon locating the Sufi element of the ajrak and demonstrating it to be a speciality of Sindh and its surrounding areas. The manual labor, the discomfort with animal dung, and the constant washing in the parched deserts is seen as a metaphor for a version of Sufism, where a Sufi or mystic goes through a number of stages of tribulations in order to unite with God. The motifs found on the ajrak also mimic those found on the Chokandi tombs, the Makli necropolis, and the Shah Jahani mosque, and the tomb of Shah Abdul Latif Bhai, a famous Sufi bard found in Sindh. Hence, there are many references to Sindhiness and spirituality when it comes to the production and use of the ajrak in the area. Today, Sufi musicians from Sindh who showcase themselves as true devotees will proudly display the ajrak during their performances. Since the ajrak as a marker of Sindhi ethnicity seems to be very deeply embedded within the craftsman and its wearers, this idea of the ajrak representing Sindhiness is also taken up by politicians who wear the ajrak whenever they want to show support for Sindh in global and local politics. In this political turmoil, the visibility of the ajrak becomes a landscape where battles for identity are fought. How do such tussles affect the artisans for whom the production of the ajrak is close to worship? Here, the ability of the craftsman to adapt to change is especially important. For example, to fulfill changing demands, Ajrak printer Abdulaziz takes orders for contemporary political designs. However, despite the increased demand, many customers and shopkeepers cannot afford the original hand-printed Ajrak, which is obviously very expensive because of the amount of effort that goes into it, and prefer instead the cheaper copies, some of which are mass-produced in China. Because of mass replications, we can find patterns of the ajrak on seemingly odd items such as phone covers, keychains, face masks, mouse pads, etc. The stress of the visibility of the fabric discounts perhaps the other more spiritual meanings included within the fabric, where it does not seem to matter whether the cloth in particular is the ajrak as long as it looks like the ajrak. However, the arrival of the polyester versions of ajrak has generally had a negative impact on the livelihood of handcrafting ajrak artisans on both sides of the border. In order to fulfill demand and to compete with dirt cheap copies, the chemical ajrak has been born that uses synthetic cheaper dyes to produce similar results. Such has been the impact of these chemical dyes that industry trees are now heavily polluted with toxic carcinogenic remnants of these chemicals, prompting studies to determine less harmful ways of producing the chemical ajrak. Some ajrak artisans are also striving to revert to the original ways of producing the ajrak by partnering with global fashion houses to produce more contemporary high fashion products using natural dyes and laborious methods. However, the trickle down effect of high fashion results again in mass production that barely refers to the original ajrak, resulting in a form that is reified sometimes beyond recognition and raises uproar as appropriation. Much more needs to be said about the ajrak, especially as it hovers on the edges of fashion and politics. From the above cases, it is apparent that the ajrak does not have one but many fascinating lives. Perhaps the creation of the polyester ajrak does mean danger to the craft of the handmade ajrak. However, as art historians, it is equally study all forms of the ajrak and similar textiles. The next time you look at a historical textiles, try to think about whether it exists in a contemporary form today. Thank you so much for your time today.